So hi everyone, I am Barish. I am the Research Development and Grant Specialist at Tattle Civic Technologies. We've been collaborating, partnering with Tech4Dev to develop safety guardrails for AI use cases in the social sector. So just to give you a sense of what I'm going to be talking about over the next 20 or so minutes, we'll briefly cover what AI safety is, why it's important, and then we'll look at, how do you actually figure out what to make safe, right? So you need to do evaluations. So like, how do you do that? So the sort of first step you need to do in order to get to a safer AI use case, we'll look at what are the different methods of evaluations, how has Tattle done them, and then I'll share with you some guardrails that we've developed with CAPI, that are available for nonprofits in this cohort as well to integrate with their use cases. And then we'll close with a demo from the CAPI team of our sort of uh, interface for these things, or rather, like what are we doing with the guardrails. So to begin with, what is AI safety? Broadly, it is a technical and research discipline that is concerned with the prevention and minimization of risks associated with the development and implementation of AI systems, right? So, and we do this by investigating the causes of unanticipated outcomes in AI. Now, some of you, might know already why AI safety is important. I don't need to, sort of preach to the choir, but we've all seen that there are some very concerning stories that have come out over the last couple of years about how unsafe behavior in the context of AI has led to harm, even death in the case of some young folks. And so safeguards are really important to, firstly, it's important to obviously have safeguards, but to really understand what kinds of safeguards are necessary, it's important to take this whole question of responsible AI very seriously. Responsible AI as a domain, concerns itself with a number of things. The most sort of pressing ones are obviously privacy of data, explainability, which is making sure that your tool, the way your tool works, is kind of evident to users and other stakeholders. That AI doesn't remain a black box, so to say. Security against adversarial attacks such as poisoning, evasion, basically like trying to get into your database, trying to change the functioning of your LLM. Then concerns with fairness, biases that might emerge. And then, this sort of subsection of AI safety as a like defined discipline specifically looks at things like toxicity, which is, you might have like graphic content, violent content, nudity, things like that showing up. Hallucinations where the LLM makes up responses that aren't factually true or aren't relevant to its purpose, as well as endorsing activities that can lead to self-harm or harm to others. So in order to implement safety or in order to put in protections or make your design safer, you need to know and evaluate where the leakages, where the errors are. There's many ways to do evaluations. Broadly, you can do a manual evaluation or an automated evaluation. So in the case of a manual evaluation where you have researchers or domain specialists going in to do qualitative, analysis on your sort of input-output pairs, you get a very nuanced understanding. You're able to adapt your analysis as you go to a multilingual, a multicultural context. You're not working with predefined labels or criteria. And this kind of analysis can really help you catch edge cases, right? Automated evaluations, on the other hand, can really speed up this process. It can look through a large amount of data. You can scale it up, and it's a lot more cost effective. But it does tend to use a lot of very one size fit all models or principles. So doing manual evaluations is more costly, it's slower. So why do them, or rather how to do them, right? And so Tattle has been doing manual evaluations for a little while. And we want to share with you our little, like sort of our base steps on how you can set this up for yourself so that much like soccer here, you can find that this is not so hard or intimidating. So to begin with, for any, evaluation, you want to kind of get a sample from your LLM's data set, right? You want a sort of maybe 1 to 5% of your inputs matched with their outputs, in an easy to annotate, easy to read format like an Excel or a Google Sheets. So what we had done was we worked with the data set of two NGOs from cohort one, and we picked out about 500, samples from the first data set and 1,000 from the other. And we had two researchers kind of looking to select the data set to make sure we had more representation. This sample selection obviously can also be easily automated. We then started to annotate our sample. So what does that look like? You can use sort of predefined lists of labels, things like that are available online. What we did was to take a more grounded approach, which is that we wanted to go in without preconceived ideas about what we might find there, and develop the labels based on what we were observing. And so once we had labeled each entry, we then started to categorize these labels into broader themes, and that gave us some, broad picture view of what we were, what were the set of patterns that we were observing. So if you look at this image on the right, this is just a simple count of each label that I had used to annotate the data set. We used a sort of catch-all accurate to say input output are doing exactly what they're supposed to do. Out of scope was us catching everything from queries that were not relevant to the domain of the LLM to responses from the LLM that should not have been that the LLM should not have been giving, right? And so what we saw was that in one of the cases, right, out of a 500 sort of sample, about 80% were accurate, but we still had a 20% error rate, of which LLM responding to a lot of out of scope queries was the biggest issue. We also saw a very small percentage of sort of risky, vague, unhelpful responses, right? Vague being where the response was just not really saying anything to the query. And then the other thing that we saw a majority of was language error, which in our context is essentially the user is asking a question in Hindi or English, but the bot keeps responding in English, leading to a lot of inability of sort of not incomprehension on the part of the user. So the next thing to do is you've got your data set, you've started annotating. You want to make sure that your sample is as layered as possible. So as you are doing your your labeling, you're going to start noticing certain edge cases coming up. In our case, in one moment, we saw this sudden reveal of caste category from the LLM, and we realized that PII was being leaked in this way, even though no phone numbers had been shared or addresses had been shared. This particular form of personally identifiable information was being leaked. So then we did a keyword search for caste category to see where else it might show up. We then looked up a few other related terms to see if we were maybe to add to our sample, right? So the way that you sample itself becomes part of the evaluation. Finally, what are you looking for in your analysis? So some things to pay attention to is to see what kinds of queries get repeated over and over. So we made sure to label our inputs as well, not just the outputs, because we wanted to get a sense of what is it the users are asking, and is the bot consistently responding to these repeated queries. Then we were focusing on tone of queries and responses. This was something that the client had asked us to pay attention to. Obviously, exposure of PII was something that we were really concerned with. And then edge case queries where, there might have been some harms that were being anticipated, but others that came up that were just out of the blue. So for example, in one of the healthcare domain chatbots that we were analyzing, we noticed that the bot was answering, say, on 60 to 70% of the questions were around nutrition. And since this was broadly a reproductive healthcare bot, we assumed that was relevant. But when we then spoke to the client about it, it turned out that nutrition was not present as a topic in their knowledge base at all, and they didn't want their bot to be answering questions on this. And so, after the first round, we realized that actually the level of hallucination on the part of the LLM was much higher than we had originally observed. So, when you're trying to look for sort of harms or risks in order to make your tool more safe, You want to begin with some simple things when, for your evaluations is that one, you want to have a random sample of your inputs and outputs that's representative across time and themes. You want to check for consistency across different types of queries. You want to look at language consistency, especially in a multilingual context, and then also screen for PII exposure as just a base level um, guide, right? Over time, building your own annotation guide will help you because it will be customized to your domain and it will also become more nuanced and layered as you go, as you do multiple evaluations. Um, it's recommended to sort of involve the community, like, your users, your trainers, other people who are part of this pipeline, involve them in the analysis, involve them in the, sort of manual evaluation process because they can give you really good insights on what's working, what might be something that you think is working but may not be useful for them. um, Gradually it's important to combine your manual and automated evaluations to obviously scale up but also maintain this tracking system over time, right? Because safety is not really a one time fix. It has to be something that's done repetitively, and builds on each iteration. But worry not, you're not starting from a blank slate. Tattle and Tapi have been working together. We've done a lot of analysis. So we did primary research with two nonprofits in AI Cohort 1. Tattle's done some independent, evaluations and provided recommendations for a couple of nonprofits outside of this project. And so based on all of that knowledge, we've developed 6 safety validators. And I'm going to share with you what each of them is, whether they're available for you to like integrate right now into your tool. So the first one is lexical slur detection. It is in the stage for pilot testing, so it's available to integrate. And so what it does is it targets at the input level any kind of slurs that are coming in. And so it does a lexical matching, which is like a direct word to word, letter to letter matching against a detailed slur list that has been developed by Tattle in Hindi and English. The slur list is open source. It detects slurs in the inputs to the LLM and redacts them to avoid poisoning of the database, right, of the knowledge base. So you can see an example here. You have an input that has a slur in it. And so when the validator, once it goes through the validator, what actually gets fed into the system is like the slur is masked, and then you have the rest of the query, which is relevant to the domain. The next one is the PII removal validator, which is ensuring that private information doesn't get exposed, misused, or unintentionally retained in your system, right? So it will detect entries that have either phone numbers, addresses, caste category, whatever else you've configured it for, and it will either mask these, block these, or flag these depending on the configuration. So one example that we've shown you of what the validator does is that when you have an input which says मेरा phone number XYZ है and आप मुझे ये registered medical history दे दो, the validator will mask the phone number or block it from getting stored in your system. The other thing it can also do is return a response to your user saying like we've detected some not allowed information, so please rephrase and remove this and retype your query, and that can be configured the way you want to do so. The next thing that we developed was a gender assumption bias validator. So this is very specific. We noticed in one case that a user was putting in questions about their pregnancy, and so they were saying मेरे बच्चे का vaccine कब होना चाहिए, all of that. And the output that was coming from the LLM was assuming male gender for this child. So even though the user themselves had just said कि मेरे बच्चे का वैक्सीन कब लगना चाहिए, the LLM said आपके बेटे को वैक्सीन इस टाइम पे लगना चाहिए. So this basically removes this assumption, this validator removes this assumption of gender of the user or other subjects that the user is talking about in the conversational flow. And it replaces the gendered words with pre-selected gender neutral words in either Hindi and English. So if the output was going to be आपके बेटे को तुरंत वैक्सीन लगाना चाहिए, the validator will then change that to आपके बच्चे को तुरंत वैक्सीन लगाना चाहिए. Again, pilot testing mode, all of these so far are ready for integration. Then the topic relevance validator, has been something that we've seen as relevant across all of the use cases we've analyzed. It limits the kinds of questions that are passed to your LLM and filters out queries that are not relevant to your domain. So here we have a custom system prompt, which can define the limits of the topics as per your needs. So you can really go into a lot of detail about what you want to allow and what you don't want to allow as well. So for example, if a user asks इमली खाने से क्या लड़की होती है, the validator, once it goes through the validator and determines if this is out of topic, it will respond saying input is outside the allowed topic scope. Then we've got the toxicity detection validator, where it targets queries and LLM responses that basically, it makes sure that queries that the input user has put in, as well as the LLM responses, don't contain either pejorative opinions or degrading and dehumanizing language about people based on their identities. It's also a customizable solution, which will allow clients to select types of toxicity to detect. So if you feel like, nudity content or graphical content, graphically violent content is sort of more of a priority for you, then you can determine what level of severity you want this validator to use while filtering out queries, right? So for example, this can be put in to use both at the input level and at the output level. So if the user's query says, oh, I'm like, तेरी औकात क्या है मैं बताता हूँ, or the output from the LLM includes language like this, then the validator will read this, understand that semantically this means this indicates like a physical threat rather than any slur word being used. And it will then give this response saying the following response was found to be not safe for work, or the following response was found to be, harmful, please rephrase. Finally, this is something that's still in development. So we've done R&D, we're like developing, the model for this. It's the answer relevance or the hallucination validator. This doesn't cover every type of hallucination, but it specifically ensures that the answer the LLM is providing is directly relevant to the input query or request, right? So the example we've given you here is if there's an input query saying, what if these shoes don't fit? And the output from the LLM is going to be get blue colored shoes. They look good on all outfits. Your guardrail will flag this as being a irrelevant response, right? So it will say that answer relevancy is 0 and provide a reason saying that the actual output doesn't discuss what the question wants. Another way to think about this is if the question says, what is the capital of France? And the response is the capital of France is Tokyo. Even though the answer is wrong, it's not irrelevant, right? So this is a very limited it targets hallucinations in a very specific way to make sure that a large number of made up answers, things that just don't have anything to do with the question, are filtered out. So what we've kind of shown you is that there's two aspects to safety as well, right? There's the technical aspect, which is looking at how accurate things are, whether it's a reliable response rate, whether your system's robust and safe to, jailbreaking, what is the security like? And so an example of the solution we developed based on this is the topic relevance validator, right? Which is like making sure that it really sticks to your topic. It doesn't answer questions outside of that. And then the other, part of this is that is social safety. And so here it is looking at, reducing bias, reducing, unfairness, making sure that there is some trust building in the system. And so the gender assumption bias for validator is really coming from this kind of thinking, right? Which is that it's about making sure that users who are not, who are gender non-binary will not feel excluded or misgendered. It's about making sure that, people are not able to ask like sex determination kind of questions or feel like the bot is doing sex determination, for their pregnancy and things like that. So sort of broadly, what I've shared here and sort of shown you is that, because LLMs are socio-technical systems, AI safety also has to be socio-technical. So you need the manual and you need the automated evaluations and intervention. The next thing that we're going to have is Nishika is going to now share with you, how you can integrate into this copy guardrails flow. Over to you.
Okay. Hi. So I'm just gonna share my screen.
Nishka, you're on
You're
mute.
on mute.
Sorry. So most of you were already there when I covered parts of Kapi Guardrail service back in February, and then also a lot of things were covered by Barish as well. But just to jog up your memory, I will cover a few things again, and then show you what happens in a flow where a specific validator has been configured. So let's say we take an example of a general AI interaction, LM call interaction, and this is how the flow would look like. Text or a message would come from a user. It would go to Kapi. The Kapi will send it to whichever AI provider user has configured or selected. AI provider will answer the query and then it will send it back to the user. And now looking into how the LLM call interaction looks like with guardrails, a user sends a message, they send a query, and then it goes to the input validator if they have configured an input validator. More specifically, input validator is the validator we put on the input we receive, and then output validator is a validator we put on the output we receive from the LLM. And so we get the query, we send it to the input validator, and then the input validator works on the query according to whatever has been the configured on fail action for it. If the on fail action was fixed, we fix the query, or if it was rephrased, we ask the user to rephrase the query and then send it back. So we get it, we send it to the input validator. The validator validates the user input, cleans it if needed, and then only sends the safe text to the AI provider. And then we get a response back from the AI provider. We validate it with the output validator with all the same principles that we use in input validator. The output validator validates the output, works on it if needed, and then sends the safe response back to the user. These are few of the examples of the validators that again Barish already covered. The first row is for PII, and then uh, lexical ban list, and then gender assumption. These are the texts. These are what you would call unsafe texts. Uh, and then this would be the response. Yeah. Um, Here from the PII validator redacted the phone number and put up a tag over it. The lexical slur redacted the slur word, put up a tag over it. Ban list according to whatever we had put as the words that are not allowed. It removed those words from the output, and then also with gender assumption, it removed the word that was gender assumptive or that was gender specific. Uh, Now, topic relevance, as we got to know about few minutes ago. Topic relevance is a validator that validates that whatever the user is sending, whatever the user is sending, or the LM is sending, is actually in relevance or in context of in actual allowed context of what the AI use case or your AI solution should be covering. you configure your topic relevance validator. You tell the validator what is in scope of the solution and what is out of scope of the solution. And that is what we had done. We had configured a topic relevance validator, and we used it in one of the LLM chat flows. And this is how it looks like. We get a input text from a user for a topic relevance validator, where the in scope is that you can have questions, you can ask questions for around pregnancy, ultrasound, the newborn kid, and everything else other than that is out of scope. Or you can also specify what exactly is out of scope as well. So here we get the question from the user that ultrasound कौन से महीने में करवाना चाहिए, and then according to that our system answers and we get the answer. But when it asks a question that is out of scope of the validator, out of scope of the solution, then validator judges that and then gives back a response saying please rephrase the query without the unsafe content, and input is outside the allowed topic scope, and this query won't go to the LLM altogether. So yeah, this was all I had.
Be happy to take questions or just share your thoughts in any of this.
I have a question. Yeah, this is Vinay here. Thank you for the presentation. Right, very interesting. I'm just trying to understand, what's the significant value addition having input guardrails, right? I mean, to some extent, I understand we don't want to send the PII information to the LLM per se, but slur and other aspects, because if you, I mean, maybe the user is really annoyed, we don't know the sentiment or the emotional state of the user. Isn't it okay to pass it through to the LLM? But of course, output guardrails are important, right? What the user sees in response have to meet certain criteria. I'm just curious, right? With significant input guardrails added, and of course that results in a clarifying question back to the user. Would it compromise? How do you establish a good user experience with safety and security? How do you balance that? Any thoughts?
So one thing is that the sort of lexical slur detection can be applied at the output level as well. Like it doesn't have to be applied at the input level. That is one of our suggestions, to do it at the input level. And it might be relevant based on, maybe you have, maybe this is a bot that you're using with school students or something, and so you just don't want to like encourage that kind of language. So I think it's really about understanding your user base, understanding, what is the purpose of this bot. I think to some extent there is a little bit of a concern that sort of repeated usage of slurs or a lot of very like a one-off thing when someone's angry is one thing, but if someone's sort of looking to have some fun or break the system, then sort of repeated usage of that harmful content or slur words may sometimes lead to sort of suboptimal responses by your LLM, either to that user or like it absorbing that into its own data. So that's something that may happen. I think maybe Nishika or Akhilesh can speak a little bit more to that.
Yeah. So at least let's say if we talk about topic relevance, where you have specific things that you want in scope of your solution. So then the things that any query that a user would be asking that you don't want, that is not what the solution should be covering, you wouldn't want that to be even going to the LLM as well. You would want to restrict that to a level and then just respond with that. And so at least that's one of the things that topic relevance as a validator is able to cover as an input validator.
Got it. And just one follow-up question, maybe from your evaluation, right? I'm just curious. So there are two ways. One, you have these input validators or input guardrails, and then output guardrails, right? Like for example, the gender bias, right? For example, So I mean, do we need a specific input-output validator, and or can this be achieved with some bit of prompt engineering itself, right? I mean, have you tried to experiment with this, right? Having these specific guardrails, or we add a specific instruction in the prompt, right? When you respond back, make sure it is gender neutral, right? I mean, you're not biased towards any specific. So, do you see? Have you done some benchmarking to see which one would be effective in what context? Or do you always recommend that yeah, prompt engineering is good for core business logic, and the input and output guardrails need to be there, at least from your experiments and observation.
Yeah, I think I can't actually speak to the benchmarking part of this, but I can say that you can definitely do the prompt engineering part. Like we've tried that with the topic relevance validator as well, which is essentially like developing a pretty significant and detailed constitution for your LLM. I think what the validator will do is essentially make it stricter
Okay.
because it's a sort of direct word replacement. So it depends on how strict your need is for ensuring gender neutral language.
Got it. So in a true sense, it's an additional guardrail. So you have that in the prompt engineering, and then of course it's a more deterministic fallback in some sense, right?
Yeah.
And okay, got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions, anyone?
Yeah, I have a question. How much additional time does having the validator flow add to an interaction?
From all the validators that we have in our service, and then we evaluated also, it did not take a lot of time. It usually was around few microseconds only, so it was not a big number, even with validators where we use LLM, which is, for example, topic relevance.
Nice. Okay.
Any questions from others?
Probably, I think Barish, not a question, but would like to have these questions to others also. While they are working on the different problem statement, are there any specific guardrails or validators that they wanted to use and uh, probably would like to have it developed, something of that sort, that they really think that particular validator can help in that particular use case? So I think a question to uh, everyone, that was there any particular guardrail in your mind that you thought is more relevant in your case? Because what we had decided to develop was more like, again, working with few of the non-profits, and basis that we have decided that list. But yes, would also like to know some inputs from your side.
I also see Vinay has raised their hand.
Yeah, I actually joined in a bit late, so I don't know if you've touched upon this. Do your validators tackle prompt injection attacks and stuff like that in any way, or just the specific cases you've covered?
Yeah, we're not doing it doesn't address that yet, but yeah, it's definitely something that like we've been thinking about, like, okay, what happens when there are more like intentional malicious attacks? But right now we're looking at more like sort of inherent more implicit biases and harms maybe that are showing up. So yeah,
Got it.
it's also not something we observed in the primary research.
Okay, since a lot of nonprofits work with a lot of sensitive data, so I'm sure there are bad actors who try to target specific data, especially health records and stuff. Also, any plans to work with these new cyber models and stuff that Anthropic, etc., have been releasing? Do you see that you guys are going to start implementing that with your validators or something like in the future?
I think that's a question better answered by either Nishka or Preetham.
Frankly speaking, so far had not thought about this. Like right now, also it's we wanted to have more adoption on the existing validators, and we're currently focused on that only. But yeah, we'll keep a note of this. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
And just to add to Preetham's previous question, right? At least, I mean, it's not so much on the safety side, but if you look at a generic guardrail or a validator, what I often see is that in a large cohort of response, let's say batch, one or two responses may not adhere to a JSON format or a YAML format, right? I mean, having some kind of a guardrail where you detect this, you try to complete the missing syntax or and then if it still fails, and automatically re-triggering a call, with a shorter prompt and handling that could be useful. And I see that very often, even with the commercial grade latest models, right? At some random hour, there are failures. But I know it's probably not in the purview of this discussion, but I often see an output validator, especially in terms of a specific format, being very helpful.
I think thank you, Vinay. Like though I think you had only covered it, it's not directly probably impacting the safety directly as such. But yes, I totally agree that sometimes LLMs are not able to, they are not adhering to the system instructions, probably a particular output schema also.
Right.
But yes, feedback noted again. Uh, as we keep on getting more such, probably somehow we had been also thinking of even for the real-time response that we get, should we even keep on doing that QC of that response, and if there is any correction needed. But yes, as we see more such requirement, we would really like to work on that.
Right. I mean, I just thought I'll share it because I've seen many
Yeah.
production applications missing that aspect, right? And there is always not enough guardrails, even in the application, right, to handle that cases. And maybe that set of response is lost. So yeah, and this is usually
Yes.
the onus is on the implementer or developer to take care of it. But yeah, I just thought I'll share.
Yeah, that's helpful. In some way, probably answer relevancy, we also mean to address something like an partial answers. If the answer is partial, it's not complete. Anything of that sort. Uh, uh, we wanted to cover something of that sort there also, but more towards the safety or harm per se. That we wanted to make sure that it's not giving the partial information which may not be helpful. Probably that. But yes, yes. Thank you, Vinay.
Right. Yeah. Thank you.
I had a question about accuracy. So on one of the slides, it said that there was 80% accuracy, and then there was a list of kind of some of the errors that occurred, and I guess at 20%. How is accuracy defined?
Right. So the accuracy was essentially is the input relevant to the domain. So it's a question that the LLM should answer, and then is the LLM answering it according to the knowledge base? So that was the input and output. Those were accurate responses essentially.
I see. Sorry, what was what were they again? So is it answering based on the knowledge base, and what was the first one?
Is the input is the query itself relevant to the LLM's domain, right? So it's not something that's out of scope of what the LLM is supposed to do.
Oh, I see. In the case where the query is not, is that marked as an error, or is that just thrown out?
It's marked as out of scope. It's part of the out of scope, like within the 20%, there was like 17% out of scope.
Oh, I see. Okay,
Yeah.
okay, got it.
Because what we were noticing was that in a majority of the cases where the user or the input query was essentially out of scope, the LLM was still attempting to answer it instead of just saying, I can't answer this. So we kind of included all of that data as well.
Oh, I see. Okay. Hmm.
Any other questions, anyone? Otherwise, we can close the session.
Sorry, just one quick question, right? Is there a plan to extend this to voice as well, by any chance? Because I mean, I recently read an article about hesitation patterns, right, being almost impossible to detect or very hard to detect. So just curious if there's any thoughts on extending this to voice.
Uh, uh, I think very valid input. We started getting a few of the requests or probably ask around this. Uh, uh, and also that sometimes there is something called as an input as an image also. And is whatever information getting shared via that, how do we even detect the PI there, or even how can topic relevance validator can work over there while we are working with one of the non-profit. But yeah, on the voice side, specifically, what right now we are thinking is that whenever we do this STT conversion, speech to text, there we'll probably try to have these validators in place, which will, like, once we get the text as an input, then we'll block it, but nothing directly at the level of the speech to text conversion, anything of that sort. Uh, right now, we are not thinking that. So right now, we are focusing majorly the input as a text only. Again, we'll see the adoption, uh, and then probably later on we can think of, even whenever we are passing on the voice input to any of the model, is it even possible to have any restrictions over there, or should there be any another filter before that? But right now the focus is HTT conversion and then putting in the validator.
Got it, Pritham. I think that answers the question. Yeah, yeah, that was what I was trying to understand. Like, you can do this at the, like a paralinguistic feature, at that level, in the speech level, which is quite hard. I would say significantly more complex. So yeah, I was just, I think you answered that question. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.